Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. My name is Mr. Aegis. I am a health teacher in the real world, and I stream indie games, classic games, first-time playthroughs, and I give health and wellness lessons like this one right now. We're going to talk today about self-talk. We're going to talk about your inner bully, those automatic thoughts that you sometimes have that put you down. We're going to learn about why that's so important and how we can stop being our own worst enemy. So let's begin. First off, of course, we have to ask ourselves, what is self-talk? What does it mean? What is self-talk? Of course, it's talking to ourselves. That seems pretty self-explanatory. It can be a mark of insanity or some mental health issue if it's too severe. But what we're talking about more generally is internal dialogue. Talking to ourselves in the sense of a narrator or commentator, that is, talking about ourselves. So it's internal dialogue that is about yourself. When you're talking to yourself about yourself. Almost everyone does this. Everyone has an internal dialogue. We talk to ourselves all the time about what we want to say to our friend when we see them next. We ruminate on school problems. We rehearse the things that we want to remember. But it's not just the words or voice in your head. It's specifically about you. We all have a running commentary. We all have internal dialogue. But this is the automatic commentary that we have about ourselves. It's a part of our stream of consciousness. But it's a specific part. It's very automatic. But let's give some examples specifically. Shall we? Let's talk about any specific examples you have about self-talk, and I'll give you one. Mine is that I am fairly clumsy sometimes. More so ever since a few years ago when I had my brain problem. And I can be clumsy and fumble with my hands, and I'll drop my keys a lot. And when I drop my keys, I often have a very automatic self-thought, what the hell's wrong with you? Oh my God, what the hell's wrong with you? And then, you reach down to pick it up, and you think you pick it up, and you reach back up, and you didn't actually grab them, or you didn't grab them well enough, and you drop them again. Please tell me other people do that. But I get the automatic thought, what the hell's wrong with you? Does something like that happen to you? Have you experienced that? Jenny likes the demiurge. Autumn face. I'll see in the last few years you've taken to associating the negative self-thoughts often with Yaldabaoth, the malicious half-creator. Better remember and compartmentalize that. That's a bad part of your brain. Ral, the brain says we've had a blood shotgun go off inside us. That is what happened. That is what happened to me. A little shotgun pellet of hard blood. Yeah. So that's the kind of self-talk I'm talking about. Those are the kind of automatic thoughts I mean. Something like, God, I'm so stupid. Or, I can't do anything right. You may experience that. You don't have to say if you have or not, but I think a lot of people do. You narrate like everything you do, and exclaim when you drop things or goof things up. Yeah, I've been there. A more in-depth example is that a couple of years ago I went to a conference. Well, it was more of a convention for certain things. And you might have heard me tell this story in other contexts, but I went to the bathroom in this big conference convention, very busy, and I left my phone on the sink to dry my hands. And when I turned around, my phone was gone. Couldn't have been more than 30 seconds, but my phone was gone. I panicked, and I was angry and anxious. And I was far from home as I had been traveling to this convention. And it ruined my entire weekend. It was supposed to be a fun event, hanging with friends, and it just ruined the entire time. All I could think about, all I could say to myself was, what an idiot. How could I do this? What's wrong with me? I would have to spend all the money to get a new phone. All inconvenient and annoying. I would have to find a place to get directions to drive back home. I let it ruin my whole weekend, and I felt very stupid. I'm so freaking stupid. Why did I do this to myself? What's wrong with me? Do you think that it was beneficial? Do you think that helped me at all? I think it made the situation any better. Your hint is that it probably... Not even in the littlest bit, no. It didn't help even in the slightest. I let it ruin what could have still been a great time. In fact, it could have been really minimized by just focusing on having fun. But why do we do it? Why do we have this self-talk? How does it arise? Is it inborn? Is it something that we learn along the way? Well, some of the research and many people who think about it think that it's, in some ways, ourselves internalizing socialization. That is, when we begin as children to learn how to relate to other people, that, we're unique individuals and we're not actually the center of the universe, and there are other people who are completely different and separate from them, we begin taking what we're learning and we're applying it inward. How we relate to ourselves. So as we learn speech as we get older, it's speech being applied to the self. I think this does help explain how it feels like a different person is talking to us. But we'll get into that a little bit later. We use speech, which we begin to learn very early, to relate to ourselves. At least at first, out loud. You notice that with little kids. They talk to themselves a lot more. Then it becomes more and more internal and more private as time goes on. Thank you for the stars. Thanks for the stars, OBL, Crepusculo. Speech itself seems to be the foundation. Because, I don't know if you think about it, but nobody ever teaches you to talk to yourself. Nobody teaches you to talk to yourself. You just start doing it. We do it as soon as we learn to speak. This goes back to the 1930s. Lev Vygotsky, see the reference there, in Thinking and Speech, suggested that internal speech originates as external speech. The external speech directed at the child by their parents and other adults, which the child gradually internalizes. And often it's the person asking and reminding, promising, telling themselves things. Often it's social things turned inward. But it's not just vocal speech. This is something that I found very interesting, is that people who are deaf, people who are born deaf, will sign to themselves. Even people who are 100% deaf from birth indicate that they still have an inner voice. just in the form of images. They still have an inner voice, but it comes in a different form. That was absolutely fascinating to me to learn. And there's a reason why there's this wonderfully handsome gentleman here on the screen. This polite-looking monkey. This monkey has a name. His name is Washoe. Not Washu, the brilliant scientist from the Tenchi series, but Washoe. A very intelligent chimpanzee, and was observed after being taught sign language. This monkey would sometimes sneak out into the yard in places where she wasn't supposed to go, and where she didn't think anyone could see her. And they observed that she signed to herself. In fact, she would sign the word quiet to herself as she snuck around in the yard in places she wasn't supposed to go. That was absolutely incredible to read about. What on earth could have possibly been the reason? If she had never been taught to sign, she wouldn't have done that. So it seems like it really does have something to do with language acquisition itself. Now, I'm not a linguistic expert. That's not my background. But it is a fascinating thing to think about. But what then is the purpose of self-talk? Was Washoe just reminding herself, I need to be quiet? Was it helping her stay quiet? Is it an inevitable outcome of having any kind of speech, whether it's sign language, symbolic language, verbal language? Hello, Empress. Emma, that's a good point. You think it helps properly index, or helps index proper behavior? Or also, you talk to yourself a lot when you have scenarios in your head of fictional stuff you want to act out. Yeah. I talk to myself lately when I'm thinking about Himiko from Star Rail, and thinking about, wow, what if she was my mom? Anyway. So communication. Communication, in general, is just the exchange of information, right? We're exchanging information between ourselves and someone else, or something else if we're talking to ChatGPT for some reason. But if communication is the exchange of information, why are we talking to ourselves? Presumably, we already know everything that we know. We don't have any new information to communicate. If person A tells something to person B, they're telling them that for a reason. But if person A and person B are the same person, it would seem pointless. Marcus asks the question, what happened to the fun douchebags? When you were younger, douchey bro types weren't good people, but they seemed happy and self-content. But the modern version, the red pillars, looks maxers, seem so angry and miserable. What changed? That's a pretty important, deep question, and I think it has a lot to do with hopelessness. People who were kind of jerky in the past, as you noticed, they seemed sort of fun, right? They could still seem like they were fun, just sort of a little bit callous towards others. There was still some optimism. Right now, there is a pervasive sense of pessimism and cynicism. And that's one of the big problems that we're experiencing right now in the education system, in youth culture. There's also a lot of cringe culture. That is, people are afraid of looking cringe. They're afraid of being made fun of. And so the cynicism is really taken off. People are not genuinely themselves anymore. And you're right, Emma. This only seems like it doesn't make sense for a person to talk to themselves. It seems like person A and person B are the same person, but there are elements of ourselves that don't actually know everything. So self-talk can help increase our self-awareness. It helps communicate things from different parts of our brain to other parts of our brain, to different parts of ourselves to other parts of ourselves. It seems like this self-talk helps our problem solving. So the way around that sort of seeming paradox is that person A and person B are not actually the same person. Or at the very least are just different elements of the same person. We're translating things from the part of the brain that thinks, verbally to a part of the brain that thinks in a different fashion. Does this mean that the voice in our head isn't really us? Well, that's a pretty big question, and it's one that we'll talk about in our next slide. But for whatever reason self-talk arises, whatever mechanism, it increases our self-awareness. It helps us situate ourselves in the world around us. It helps us figure out who we are, what we can do, what we can't do. It helps us relate to the world. Think about the resources we have, internal and external. We're telling ourselves what we know or what we think we know, as if we were another person. We order ourselves around. We give ourselves assessments of our situation. But the more we think about ourselves, the more we dwell on self-talk, and that can be a problem. It can help us process and plan things out and problem solve and process our emotions. But the more we self-focus, the more we self-talk, the more we self-talk, the more we self-focus, and it can get out of hand. Let's pause and do a little exercise. Not physical exercise, although you can do that anytime you like. Tell me about your inner voice when you were developing, if you remember it. Because before we talk about who that voice actually is, tell me who that voice was for you. Was it you? Or did it seem like someone else? Or do you not remember? Most of the people I talk to, when this conversation comes up, which doesn't come up very often, it doesn't seem like something that just comes up naturally, but when I do, most people don't remember what their inner voice was like before this moment. Rossi asks if plugging yourself into the LLM is a bad idea. It can be. Emma's inner world is composed of thousands of fragments of other conversations. Jenny likes talking to the robots. I would prefer talking to the chobits, but I don't think many of you will get that reference. Well, actually, given the demographics of this class, you probably will. Rousey's inner voice was rather mean and nasty early on. Associated it with God and grew to hate it. Never good enough for it. That is a feeling I can relate to. Rouse says it always sounds like you, or what you think you sound like. But how does this voice get this way? How does this clown-to-clown communication happen? Now again, I'm not a linguist, but if it depends heavily on the way we learn speech and the language we use, then the inner voice and the self-talk between different languages, between different cultures, between different societies would be very, very different. The wording, the tone in which we talk to ourselves, the phrasing, even the grammar. We learn how to talk from other people, so we learn how to talk to ourselves from other people. They can all influence that voice within ourselves. So you may have learned that different languages have a bunch of words for one different thing, and other languages have one or none. Finnish has a bunch of different words for snow and ice. A language might be more nuanced in thinking about love. Or it might not use pronouns, so you would get very little you or I in your conversation. Which does make me wonder how it influences self-talk. So it would be interesting to see what the research is like between different countries and language. That's just language. There's also our parents or guardians, whoever raised us, which, let me tell you, I can very clearly hear my old man's tone influence my inner voice when I talk. Sometimes I even call myself by the name, by my name the way my parents did. The very same tone, the very same exasperation in their words when I hear that name in my head. But no, Empress, talking to yourself does not make yourself crazy. Different cultures might be more individualistic, or they may place more emphasis on achievement in a way that influences our self-talk. Even specific experiences, very particularly strong moments in your life, be they positive or negative. There was a time when I was a little kid, I was playing in the gravel parking lot of the little church school I went to during recess. I saw this particularly big little stone in the gravel, and I kicked it, and it went flying across the parking lot, and it hit this other kid named Aaron, right in the nose, and it broke his nose, and it was gushing blood. It was gushing blood. And the teacher of this tiny little fundamental church school freaked out and ran over and grabbed me and said, "What the fuck is wrong with you?" And it was the first time I'd heard the F word. And it freaked me out. And sometimes I can hear a little of the influence of the tone when that specific phrase is said to me, or when I hear that. All of those different elements, our language, our cultures, our experiences, different wording and phrasing, all of that is on top of you, the individual that you are. For example, introverted people who are more self-focused may have more self-talk. All of the elements of your personality. And the personalities of others. You know, the influence of media, particularly people whose voice you begin to hear within your own. So it seems like this inner voice you develop is you, but also filtered through all of these many, many powerful factors. I mean, you say yes when failing to clean up your room. You hear your father saying annoying, unhelpful stuff in your head. Ooh, yeah, I feel you there. And I should have told her, God, hey, it was God's will. So who is it? Who is this voice in your head? Is it actually you? Well, it is. And it's also not. You are both the receiver and the observer. It's you. More or less. But you are not your thoughts. It's you, but as developed through everyone and everything that has ever had an effect on you. It's you through a mirror darkly. There are so many layers of filter between the you that you are and the you that talks to you. All of the preconceived notions, all of the biases, ingrained patterns of behavior, all of the learned judgment or helplessness or perceptions that others have passed on to you, including society. But you are not the voice in your head. All those passing thoughts aren't the person you are, tangible person, or if you prefer, the intangible spirit. Briefly, as an aside, I'll say this can connect with conversations we've had in the past in this class on hypnotherapy and guided meditation. And that these are attempts to get past all of these filters to the actual you. How do intrusive thoughts relate to this? Well, I am no psychologist, but I would imagine that this is a disordered version of self-talk. But you are not your thoughts. You are you, and the thoughts are influenced by everything around you. So our next exercise is that if self-talk is not inborn, that is, it doesn't actually come naturally, for the most part, that it only comes after language acquisition, and that it is influenced so severely by everything else besides ourselves, what does that mean for us? What does it mean if it's not something that just happens out of nowhere? If we're talking about self-talk as something that can be harmful to us, something that can be harmful to our mental health, but it's also not inborn, that it is a social construct, as Rao puts it. As I take a sip from my 210 rated ultra generic gas station Diet Cola, the worst I've ever had in my life. It means that it can be changed. If it can be learned, it can be unlearned. If it can be influenced by others, it can be influenced by you. And no, it is not a Pepsi. All I wanted was a Pepsi. Just one Pepsi. Institution. Okay, I really should not sing. Especially that. Maybe I'll sing later. It means that your self-talk can be changed. We can brainwash ourselves. We can gaslight ourselves in a positive way. Yeah, I shouldn't sing. Shouldn't sing that song, Ross. What can be wrought by man's hands can be unmade by man's hands. If it can bleed, it can die. If we have positive self-talk already, well, that's great. But we're here because of the negative self-talk. And the reason why I have Capcom up here is because I'm going to break down the negative self-talk patterns in an acronym, which is my specialty. Some of you know of my amazing acronyms in the past. Lat, Pog, Goth, all those great ones. And today's acronym is Capcom. You're free to tell me your favorite Capcom games. We're here because of negative self-talk. Much of our self-talk can be broken down into these categories, as I have conveniently labeled them. All those things that tell us stuff like, I can't do this. I always mess up. What's wrong with me? They're gonna hate me. All that kind of stuff. They break down into these 6 categories: comparing, amplifying, polarizing, catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, and mind reading. Those are the 6 categories that I have. Build yourself a Tulpa cheerleader. You know, Emma, you're really gonna like, I think, one of these ones coming up. The first one is comparing, and I think you've probably heard the saying, comparison is the thief of joy. One of the first common types of negative self-talk is comparing. Comparing yourself against others' expectations. I'm not as good as blank. Blank is better than me at blank. But comparing never gives you an objective look at who you are or what you've done. It's always seeking a measure. And isn't it interesting how you never look at someone that you're better than, or that you think you've done more than, that you've succeeded? Your automatic self-talk is never, wow, I did better than blank. It's, wow, I did worse than blank. It can, of course, be beneficial to always be pushing yourself, trying to strive for more. But if you have one scoop of ice cream and you don't see anyone else, you might be happy with that scoop of ice cream. But if you've got one scoop of ice cream and you see someone with two, now suddenly you feel bad. Yeah, or else exactly. You see someone else who's married, has a child, full-time job, you can't help but compare yourself to them. That reminds you of something you don't have. Now, if that's something that you really wanted and you were striving towards, and that comparison didn't make you feel negative about yourself, then it would be different. But it's not happening in a helpful way, is it? It just makes you feel bad. The comparing is one of the major instant negative self-talk patterns we have. The second is amplifying, where we zoom in on every flaw, but never the good stuff. Amplifying negative self-talk heightens our belief in our failings and a sense that everything we do ends that way. You have automatic self-talk when you do something bad or you fail at something, but where's that automatic self-talk when you do something good? Not exactly a balance, is it? The next one is one you may be familiar with, and that's polarizing. Black and white behavior. Black and white thinking. Everything that you do either has to be perfect or it's a failure. If I have a stream and I have a few mistakes, I forget to say something, it's not as well attended as I was hoping, then hey, it's an automatic failure, right? Rather than saying, hey, there were some good things, there were some bad things. It's all good or all bad. Zeki says your brain takes all your failings and just plays them on repeat. And that drowns out all the good stuff, right? So we compare, generalize, polarize, and then we catastrophize. We take every small mistake and assume that it will lead to the worst possible outcome. There's no nuance, no room for error. Just every trivial mistake means that it's going to end in disaster. I got a bad grade, and so, well, now I'm going to flunk out, and I'm going to end up sleeping in a gutter, and I'm going to die alone. Hey, that's probably not going to happen, but that negative self-talk might say so. We compare, amplify, we polarize, we catastrophize, and we generalize. Emma, you ask if I would support a person intentionally cultivating narcissism? No, certainly not. We're looking for balance between polarizing and, say, generalizing. But we do want to gas ourselves up, because for the most part, we're never saying anything good about ourselves. I mean, most people are not narcissists. Fortunately, there are some. I've known several. But especially with overgeneralizing, we do the opposite. It says that I am blank. I am a screw-up. I'm too weak, emotional. These general statements that tell you that every mistake you make is related to some immutable characteristic that can't be changed. You feel like a failure. What you feel like is a failure, even though what you actually are, in a very tiny sliver, is someone who failed at something. You failed a class. That doesn't make you a failure. Things that you do aren't necessarily who you are. I mean, if you kill someone, yeah, you are a murderer. That's different. But if you fail a class, that doesn't make you a failure. We don't want to generalize things that we do into things that we are. You screw something up, that doesn't mean you're a screw up. And that's an interesting point of balance. We don't want to hugbox ourselves.
You really believe your own hype that much? I am the hype!
I am the hype. I am the one who hypes. We don't want to lie to ourselves and say that we didn't make a mistake. You don't want to take this and say, I failed at something, so I'm not a failure, but I'm also not someone who failed at anything. Like, I didn't fail. I must have been cheated, or someone else made a mistake, or it's someone else's fault somehow, for example. We don't want to lie. The problem is that the balance is off. The scales are tipped in the wrong direction. If someone's self-talk is already positive, then they don't really need to worry. But the M in Capcom is then mind reading. Mind reading is the presumption that you know what others are thinking or feeling or believing about you, and that it's negative. You're interpreting everyone else in the least charitable way when they interact with you. You assume that they saw you make a mistake and that they think you're a failure. You assume that they didn't talk to you when you met, or they didn't seem to like you and so they hate you. It plays this card on you, mind rot. The beauty of mental attacks is that your victim never remembers them. What's the D&D attack? Vicious mockery? Yeah. You're doing that to yourself. When you assume that you know what other people are thinking about you, feeling about you. Majestically through the sky, but I can walk. They can walk. Other Pokemon can shout and shoot lasers from their mouth, but I can walk. They can walk. Don't assume you know what other people are thinking. You do this far too often, Seki. Yeah, I think a lot of people do this one too. It's a lack of communication. And I think it's even more prevalent right now, as we were talking about earlier with cringe culture and fear of being judged, that people don't even want to ask the other person what they think. Even that feels too embarrassing. We don't want to put ourselves out there and be vulnerable. It's very, very hard. You don't want people to think that you're annoying or Maybe they do have a negative thought about you, and if you ask them about it, it'll make it worse. Or maybe they're neutral about you, and if you ask about it, you'll seem cringy. Yeah, Ralsei, if you assume someone thinks the worst of you, it can have a detrimental effect on how you interact with them and with other people. So that is our Capcom. We compare ourselves to other people. We amplify every mistake. Never talk about the good things. We polarize every mistake as either... We polarize everything we do as either all good or all bad. We catastrophize the bad things as always going to lead to the worst possible outcome. We generalize things we do into things we are. And we assume that other people are judging us. Which I think means we should do our cringe lesson next time. Our cringe lesson should be our next lesson. Question then, if we're doing all these things to ourselves, is what to do about it. Because it's not a small matter. We know we have this voice. We know that it's us through the filter of language, of other people's expectations, our own beliefs about ourselves, social and cultural behaviors, and all those kinds of things. We know it can be supremely negative. Sounds like a bully on our shoulder. Tells us everything's bad and wrong with us. But it does some pretty serious things to us. It can leave us with high blood pressure, high cortisol, and cortisol max us. Make it harder to fall asleep, give us insomnia, leave us fatigue, and those are just the physical issues. All of which reinforces the mental problems, which are pretty significant. Feelings of helplessness can demotivate us from even trying. Can leave us with shackles of low self-esteem, make us insecure. As Ralsei's pointing out, make it hard to have interpersonal connections. And if we stay in our comfort zone trying to avoid others' judgments because our own judgments are already so harsh on ourselves, we can miss opportunities. And then the big two, of course, anxiety and depression. We fret over every little mistake. We bury ourselves in the negative instead of treating ourselves like a friend, as Emma said. A lot of negative stuff. What can we do about it? How do we stop? The way we're going to do this, we're going to say enough. Enough is enough. How do I stop? We're going to do another acronym. We're going to ICP. We're going to identify the negative self-talk. We're going to challenge it, and we're going to put it into perspective. We're going to identify it, hone in on it. We're going to raise the challenge flag, and then we are going to put that thought into perspective. We're going to stick to 3 simple steps. There is a whole host of ideas and therapies that are used, but for the purpose of our class here, we're going to try to nail this with 3 simple ideas. And the first is identifying our negative self-talk. It's a bit like when you train a dog. I've trained dogs in the past, and it doesn't help to punish the dog for something the next day. In fact, you don't want to do any kind of punishment if you can avoid it. But you don't want to challenge the dog's behavior the next day. You want to challenge it when it happens. You want to catch your inner critic in the act. So when you have that automatic negative thought, pause. You want to catch it. Negative self-talk relies on stealth. It relies on getting to you when you're unaware. It has to happen quickly. You want to identify it and label it. Say that this is self-talk. This is negative self-talk. This isn't objective. That negative self-talk says, God, what is wrong with you? What the hell's wrong with you? You always mess this up. Catch it. Don't just let it go. That was a negative self-talk. Label it. And it can help to pinpoint the label. What kind of self-talk was it? You get a bad grade and you're like, oh, I'm never as good as blank. Say to myself, it was just negative self-talk, and it was what kind of negative self-talk? What of our Capcom was that? We get a bad grade and we say, oh my God, such a bad student. Never get as good a grade as blank. Comparison. Such a bad student. Generalizing. But it can also help to identify the method. How did it get in? Were you tired? Or distracted? Did that make it easier for the negative self-talk to just pop up? Some therapists suggest using a journal to keep track of this. Might be helpful for you if you want to do that, but at the very minimum, identify the negative thought, identify the situation. What else were you feeling? What else were you thinking about? Were you reading Twitter? Was that making you feel more hopeless, helpless? What you want to do is be a pop-up blocker. Your inner critic, your bully, is heavily reliant on presuming that it's you. Its detrimental effect is strongest when it's allowed to just play in the background, constantly dragging you down. You just let it do its thing constantly. It's like an enemy bard, which is what this image is here. An evil enemy bard that is debuffing you. And if you let it go unchallenged, it's just going to keep going. Take note of it. Catch it in the act. Label it. Think about why it was able to get in on you. Don't let this enemy bard just keep going. Throw a fireball at it. Or use Eldritch Blast. I don't actually know any other D&D attacks, so pick your attack of choice. But blow this bastard to Kingdom Come. With a attack, don't blow him. He doesn't actually have any genitalia to speak of. So that's our identifying part. And then we want to challenge that negative self-talk. Take that statement, whatever was said, challenge it. Interrogate that bastard. Is it true? Is the thing that it said actually true about you? Is there any evidence for it? Are there alternative possibilities? I always screw this up. You forget to defrost the meat that you were going to use for dinner. You forgot to take it out of the freezer. You come back home and it's still in the freezer and you don't have your meal defrosted ready to cook. Always screw this up. That might seem innocuous, might seem benign. A little bit of self-criticism. But you know that's not true. You know that you haven't failed to take the meat out of the freezer every single time. Otherwise, you would never have been able to take the meat out of the freezer. And when you challenge that negative self-talk, your critic, which pretends to be you, can only sputter. It might bring up one or two other times that it's happened, but then the statement falls apart. You haven't forgotten to take the meat out of the freezer every single time. That's just not true. Science it. That's right. Ask for evidence. I never get this right. That's just not possible. I'm such an idiot. Well, maybe sometimes. But you're not always that way. And then interrogate the reason. Why is your brain saying that? Why is some part of your brain saying that? Is it helping? Sometimes negative comments are accurate. And they happen for the purpose of improving yourself. Your negative self-talk is, God, I forgot to take the meat out of the freezer again. Well, maybe sometimes you do that. And you should probably do a better job remembering not to forget. That makes sense. Maybe there's a purpose to that negative self-talk, but to say it in the way that you often say it to yourself is not helping. We don't teach people that way, do we? If I'm trying to help a student remember something or learn some new skill, I don't berate them. I don't say, "You're so stupid, you always get this wrong." So why would I say that to myself? Yeah, you should allow yourself self-criticism, Emma. You should be able to accept valid criticism and say, yeah, I do make mistakes. I don't always make mistakes. I went to work on time today. I don't always screw up. But be prepared to demand evidence from your inner voice when it says that you're always a certain way, you're always screwing up, you're always wrong. Don't let it just teach you like a terrible teacher. You're so stupid, you always get this wrong. And then put it into perspective. Because a lot of times your negative self-talk is about stuff that isn't even a big deal. It's about dropping your keys. Okay, my hands are a little clumsy. I've had a brain injury. It's not a personality flaw. I'm not a bad person because I'm clumsy. So why do I keep letting my brain say I'm such a screw up or I'm so stupid and clumsy? Because I drop my keys a lot. There are mitigating factors. There's a reason it happens. Is there any evidence that the weird homunculus of our self-talk, which is kind of us but not really us, are there alternative explanations? You forgot to defrost the meat you were going to use for dinner. Okay. You haven't failed to do it every time. Hello, Birdbanes. Great to have you with us again. When your negative self-talk tells you you always screw this up, you know that it's not true. You know there's a reason that it's trying to tell you that. But don't let it just berate you and tell you you're an idiot for making a mistake. That's overgeneralizing. Polarizing. Yeah, you messed up that time. The example we're using of forgetting to take the meat out of the freezer. Okay, it's happened a few times. Your brain saying you screwed up every time, you always forget this, is not true. It doesn't happen every time. You've interrogated that. You've asked yourself, why is my self-talk being such a dick to me today about this? Maybe this time it's because you were tired. You had a lot of work to do today. It just slipped your mind. It wasn't some personality failure of yours. You're not a bad person for making that mistake. And then we get to that saying that goes to what Emma was talking about earlier. Would you say that to someone else? Would someone else say that to you? If your inner voice says, God, you're so stupid. You always screw this up. What's wrong with you? Would you say that to someone else? And not expect to get your teeth knocked out? Probably not. I would hope not. Would you say that to a friend? Exactly, Birdbane. We're talking about self-talk, negative self-talk. Those automatic thoughts we often have where we make a mistake and our brain says, oh, you're an idiot. What's wrong with you? Why do you always screw this up? You're such a failure. Because it's so common. Drags us down a lot. But we would never let ourselves say that to someone else. We let our brain just be an enemy bard that constantly debuffs us with psychic damage. What's that attack? D&D. Is it Vicious Mockery? I've only played a couple games of D&D. I think it might be Vicious Mockery. It just constantly debuffs us, drains our will. Emma, you say your inner voice is often related to daddy. Yeah. I can say, like I mentioned earlier, there are certain things that when I screw up, I hear my parents' voice in my head very, very clearly. In my voice. The tone. Things that they would say. The way that they would say my name. Aegis. Although, it wasn't Aegis. Or that teacher that I talked about earlier when I kicked the rock and it accidentally broke that kid's nose and they screeched at me for making a stupid mistake. It can often be related to low self-esteem, and sometimes it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Vicious Mockery, you unleash a series of insults laced with subtle enchantments at a creature you can see within range. Yeah, that's often what it's like. Go back and summarize the 6 types that we've identified, and that's comparing, amplifying, polarizing, comparing yourself against others. I'm never as good as blank. I think that's probably the most common, always comparing ourselves to others. I think the second most common would probably be generalizing. When you make a mistake and you make it feel like that's who you are. You screwed up and so you're a screw up, rather than being a person who screwed up. So let's reset. Let's reset and reframe those negative self-talk. Those negative self-talk phrases that we often hear in our heads, and make them a little bit better. How often do you hear yourself say that you're not doing enough? You're not doing good enough. Or I just need to do better. I just need to do more. I need to work harder. That's one I often see memes of. I just need to do more. I need to do better. Yes, Birdbanes. Competitiveness can be very motivating. As you get older, though, more of the competitiveness should be with yourself rather than comparing to others. Being better than you were the day before. It was Master Kevin. For you, it's less comparing yourself to others and more finding some sort of group you just know you would have been a good fit for, wishing you had been a part of it like a decade prior. Yeah, I feel that. Wishing you'd gotten into things earlier. Reframing that I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, I'm not working hard enough as, I'm doing the best I can, given the circumstances. I work pretty hard on trying to stay alive. I feel bad about my fitness lately because I'm not doing as much as I used to, but hey, I had a brain injury. It's hard. Doing the best I can. But you don't have to just gas yourself up. You don't have to make it positive. It can just be neutral. When you screw up and your brain goes, I'm so stupid. You can just make it more neutral. I made a mistake. I screwed up. You don't have to lie and say, I didn't mess up at all, I'm perfect. Made a mistake. It's not the end of the world. Screw something up and you go, I always mess that up. You can reframe that positively. I can learn from this. That's a silver lining. But again, you don't have to make it a positive. You can make it more neutral. You can't do anything right. That's something I know people have told themselves before. You can admit that you don't have it yet. But it's not true that you can't do anything right. That's never true. You don't have this just yet. Nobody likes me, or people don't like me. That's not true. There are people who like you, and you might want more, and that's great. Something to work for. I'll never be as good as blank. I think anyone here who's a streamer as well, any other VTubers will feel that. There's a lot of jealousy. I certainly feel that. I feel like I work pretty hard. I'm like, I'll never be as popular as blank. I'll never have as many viewers as someone else. But I can't be them. I can only be myself and work with my own strengths and weaknesses. Yeah, Birdbanes, you don't want to lie to yourself and not admit mistakes. But when you frame those mistakes negatively, you're less likely. You're actually less likely. A very common negative self-talk phrase that people talk about is their brain telling them you're a failure. And that's not true. You might be a person who has failed at things, as we all are, may have had setbacks, but you're only a failure if you stop trying. Another one is, this is too hard. This is too hard. I tried something new and it's too hard and I can't do it. It might be really hard. You don't have to lie to yourself and say it's easy. I want to learn piano. It's very hard. It's a real challenge. Doesn't mean it's too hard for me. I just need to work it into my schedule that I practice each day, which I have not done a very good job of. I have not done a very good job. I will admit. Being honest. But I want to get into a little piece of research. That is on the difference between I and you in your self-talk. Some people, when they have automatic thoughts, it's I. I never do this right. I screw up all the time. I always get this wrong. It's too hard for me. Some people's self-talk says you, though. You always screw this up. What's wrong with you? Not what's wrong with me. I versus you. A lot of this research comes from physical activity, specifically for athletes and their self-talk, because their self-talk is a pretty powerful area of psychology for performance. Because they're always trying to be positive with themselves. You got this. You can do this. That kind of thing. But you notice that it's you got this, not I got this. There is some evidence that third person is better than first person because it can distance yourself from the situation. It can make it seem like it's more objective. You got this. Feels like someone else telling you. It can feel more objective. You've got this. You can do this. You've done harder things before. You just made a mistake. It wasn't perfect, but you got it done. Yeah, I'm not a third-person thinker. Specifically in, say, performance research, if you can make yourself say things like that, it can help increase confidence and increase self-control. But it's not using third person as in like calling yourself by your name. It's more of inserting that third person pronoun in those self-talk statements. You've got this. You can do it. And you can do it. It puts space between yourself and the activity. There are a couple of other good tools to put in your toolkit, though, when dealing with your self-talk. You can also give yourself an automatic positive response, or just an automatic neutral response. You can simply try to drill it into your head that every time you have that negative self-talk, it triggers you to just say, that was just a negative thought. Just an automatic thought. It's not true. It's not necessarily right. It's just automatic. It's a reflex. Now, of course, practicing mindfulness is helpful for a lot of things. Breathing exercises, meditation. When you give yourself more conscious thought, you have less automatic thought. You can also use an accountability buddy, which I know people think is a cringy sounding word, but if you're struggling with it, ask someone to help. Get yourself a support character. Get yourself an allied bard to help you deal with that enemy bard. Yeah, and the mind can fool itself. Earlier we talked about why we even have self-talk and how it arises because of our means of language acquisition. Because the voice in your head isn't really you. It's you, but it's you filtered through all of the influences in your life. People you grew up hearing things from, the media you consume, societal expectations, your culture. So it's you filtered through a lot of different things that aren't necessarily you. Your voice goes out into the world and it comes back very different. Because it is that important. And yes, you can use your stuffed animals for that. It's one of the best things about stuffed animals. But this is really important. I think that's exactly right, Birdbanes. It is a composite. You are in part a sum of the different things that have shaped you. There's a you that's below that we talk about in, say, hypnosis and meditation, of trying to get below all of those surface things that have filtered or that filter your conscious thoughts. There's a you beneath that. And then there's the you filtered through all those things. Because negative self-talk, that negative enemy bard that's constantly debuffing you, make it hard to sleep, can increase anxiety, make you feel helpless, and increase your stress, lead to inflammation, physical and mental health negative consequences. And on a more abstract level, What you tell yourself, you believe. If you're constantly telling yourself you're a screw-up, you tend to believe that. And there is a bit of fake it till you make it here at play. You constantly tell yourself, I can do this. I got this. You're more likely to believe it. They can be self-fulfilling. And if we're open about these conversations and have them out loud rather than just in our head, it improves our awareness of them. Understand the context of the world around us. We want that to be accurate. We want it to be objective. I would never talk to almost anyone the way I talk to myself sometimes. If I caught someone talking to a friend the way I've sometimes talked to myself, well, you know the reputation that badgers have. What do you think I would do to them? If someone talked to one of my students the way that I talk to myself sometimes when I'm feeling down on myself, I'd be furious. But it's more than just you. It's about more than just you. You can help other people by understanding this. You can be a role model, exemplifying positive self-talk. How many of you have noticed that there is a lot of self-deprecation in the world? How many of you are in Discord chats or chat groups and you see people in those groups say negative things about themselves? How many of you look at your Twitter feed and you see your mutuals say negative stuff about themselves? There's a lot of, I don't want to call it romanticization of being a loser, but there is a bit of romanticization of being a loser, feeling like a loser, screwing up, feeling hopeless. Yeah, and I would say in an excessive way. I think there's a lot of that going around. And sometimes it can just feel like a funny comment. But I think it would help us and help others if we started catching those. If we started not saying so much negative stuff about ourselves. Exemplify positive self-talk. Kevin suggests a manga called Silver Spoon, about a kid with a burnout who goes and does something completely different to gain new perspective. Well, Birdbanes, you're already on top of things by not using social media all that much. But you can be other people's support bard. Give them positive feedback. They post something they're doing, a little art piece or a grade or something, give them positive feedback. You don't have to lie or gas them up. You can just give objective, positive feedback and challenge those negative thoughts. A lot of people in your groups might be saying negative stuff about themselves. Challenge that. You can provide them some of the techniques we've talked about here today. Talk about the things you learned. When your friends are saying negative stuff about themselves, don't just let that pass. Don't let their enemy bard keep debuffing them. When we call ourselves a loser or an idiot or any of those self-deprecating, denigrating comments, it makes other people feel like that's normal to do. You can improve your own self-talk, but you can also improve other people. The tongue is sharper than any other two-edged sword. Kid Kirsch, thank you so much for enrolling in our little classroom learning community. It's great to have you with us. Happy to have you here. Challenge their negative self-talk. Words have immense power. A single word at the right time can hurt or heal. It can be so powerful. Someone having a bad day, and you're having a bad day, so you lash out at them. It can make things so much worse for them. On the other hand, the right word at the right time can change everything. Someone having that really bad day, and you say the right thing that lifts them up. You know what? Maybe they get a better night's sleep that night. They feel a little bit better about themselves. They're not ruminating as much at the end of the day. They get a better night's sleep. They wake up. They're a little bit better rested. They get a better grade on a test. They end up with a better grade in the class. They get into the college they were trying to get into. Their whole life changes. I'm not saying that happens all the time or with everything that you do. Fact is, you don't know. You don't know what small ripple in their life that you could have. Yeah, if you make someone's day just a little bit better, you don't know what effect that might have on that person. You give someone a little compliment at the right time, and it's, honest and sincere, and they feel good about themselves. They ask that person out that they've been wanting to ask out. And it works out. And they end up meeting their soulmate because of it. You just don't know. You can't go around feeling guilty about not doing it all the time or not being perfect in that way, but that should help motivate you. You could be the butterfly responsible for the positive hurricane halfway around the world, as Jenny puts it. I think about this a lot when I'm driving because people are really bad drivers here, as they are everywhere, but around here, and someone cuts me off and I flip them off and I'm honking and trying to get around them, and I think, I don't know what they've got going on. I don't know what's going on in their life. If I stress them out even more and they arrive at wherever they're going all stressed out, maybe they're on their way to an interview and they bomb the interview and they don't get the job and they struggle and they can't pay the rent. I don't know. It's easy to succumb to cynicism, as Jenny just puts it. We can't be perfect, but we can do a little bit better. Thank you so much for enrolling, Fallen Aspect. Great to have you with us in our little classroom community. Happy to have another student with us. And yes, Birdbanes, it doesn't have to be life-changing better. We're all carrying such a heavy load, you just don't want to make it worse. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well tonight. I hope you all are as well. Like when I talked about that story earlier, when I was at the convention and I lost my phone, or rather, it was stolen, as I turned out later. I let it ruin my whole weekend. Another person giving me a kind word or helped me out a little bit could have changed all that. Now, I don't pull up a lot of diagrams and research, but I just wanted to show this screen to show you that people do research this stuff. There's science behind all of this. Like this research showed that there were significant correlations between regional activity and psychological assessments in the brain regions, showing interaction between voice identity and emotion regulation strategy. And what that means in short, because I don't get too deep into the science of stuff here, this is a practical class. It means that neutral self-talk is very effective. When you distance yourself from the moment and you diffuse that automatic sentiment, you take a step back from that automatic thought that says, God, I'm so stupid. Oh, what an idiot. Oh, I always screw that up. When you take a step back and you distance yourself from it, and you talk to yourself more neutrally, your brain believes it. You're more likely to believe something that seems more distant and objective. Does one self-talk through grief? Well, oftentimes, in my experience, grief comes with guilt. And self-talk with guilt is very powerful. Because self-talk is already telling you things like, you screwed up, or you didn't do enough. Depending on the source of that grief, that can be very challenging. You're going to get a lot of automatic self-talk about missed opportunities. When that grief is over a person, for example. And it can be very hard to be positive, so it may not be always worth it to try to reframe that in the positive way we were doing earlier, where we were reframing them positively. It's absolutely okay. Absolutely okay. This is open classroom. We've talked a lot about trying to reframe things positively. That can be very challenging when it comes to grief. So it can be more useful to try to be neutral. Be more objective rather than framing things positive, because there's, not necessarily a positive way to reframe something revolving grief. But that brain image that I was bringing up earlier, my brain kind of forgets now. But the point is, neutral self-talk, objective self-talk, works really well for you. And positive affirmations from others are very beneficial. You want to hear positive things from other people and objective things from yourself. Which means that other people want to hear positive things from you. Be honest with yourself and be kind to others. That's the message. Because that's going to be very effective. And it's going to make you feel good about yourself for being a positive influence. When you see other people denigrating themselves, saying negative stuff, feeling down on themselves, there might be a reason. It might be honest. But you don't just want to let them sit there and ruminate on negative stuff. If I see someone post their art in a Discord server and be like, it's kind of garbage, I don't want to let that stand. I'm not just going to let that sit there in their head, because it's probably not garbage. And even if they're kind of joking with themselves, still say something positive. Be the person who picks them up. One man's trash is another man's treasure. Absolutely. Being a role model makes you feel better about yourself. Be the support bard. Talk down your inner negative bard, the enemy bard that's debuffing you constantly, and be a positive support bard for your allies, your team, your party, your friends. But let me know if you have any questions, comments, feedback, suggestions, insults, rude hand gestures. And as our homework question, or our, take-home thing, what would you tell me? Or what would you tell your friend? Your friend AJ, you're at a convention with them and they have their phone stolen and it's ruining their weekend and they're feeling down on themselves. They're feeling like such an idiot. How could I leave my phone on the counter, knowing that this is a convention, knowing that there's tons of people around and somebody's probably going to snag it? What would you tell them? Would your comments to them be the same as my self-talk was when that happened to me? What would you say? Aegis-san. I was a soulless lich. No. Probably not, Ivy. No, probably not. Let's collapse the phone cartel, Jenny would tell me. I'm so stupid. I can't believe I did that. I always mess this up. I ruined this weekend. Yeah, happens to a lot of people. Steak is easy to make, Ivy says. Ra would be focused on the sort of concrete ways to help, which is beneficial. Acquiring the important data. Here, let me use my phone. You can call your carrier and download all that stuff you needed. Download directions for you. Because it is hard to drive from Chicago back to where I needed to get home. But you would definitely not tell your friend the same kinds of things that your brain might tell you. So don't be your own worst bully. Don't bully yourself. No bully. That's not going to help you or anyone else. And you're welcome, Seki. I like giving this lesson. Anyway, yeah, that was our lesson. And I'm so grateful that you were all here to help me through it and to hopefully learn a little bit and hopefully take a little bit of this with you and improve your self-talk. And you did a great job. Let's fix that. Let's fix the internet. If you would like your certificate of completion, we'll have this in the Discord. You can get that in the Discord there. And follow us on the socials. We're not done for the night, though. We're not done for the night, though. When we come back, we will be playing some Persona 5 Royal, not Royale, as I've learned. We're going to continue destroying the evil bullies in that world, who continually bully Joker. And we're going to fix that world. We're going to fix their hearts. We're going to change their hearts or die.